You know, I do too many negative reviews on this channel. Let's be positive as I cover Left in the Dark, the first episode of The Loud House chronologically on television. If you're a Loud House fan and you haven't seen this episode, what are you doing? But here's a brief rundown. Spoilers for the two people who haven't seen the episode. The season finale of ARG is releasing and Lincoln wants to watch it. In order to do so, he'll have to keep his siblings from the TV so he can have it. He screws up after forgetting about Lucy, so in order to placate Lucy, he plugs in their old black and white TV, which cuts the power. They decide to cut the power back on, Lori volunteering to do so. As Lori goes to step into the basement, her light source fizzles out, and an argument breaks out. Lincoln decides to take responsibility and enter the basement. As they go through the basement, a bunch of things scare them, but they're not real threats. They freak out over a ghost that turns out to be Lincoln's walkie-talkie on some clothes. Lincoln rushes back up to the stairs to claim the TV, but it turns out he missed ARG. He's bummed, but his sisters tell him that he basically lived through it and comfort him. And scene. Synopsis is out of the way, so let's get on with it all. This episode, in 11 minutes, takes on the gargantuan feat of establishing 11 uniquely distinct characters, each one with their own dynamic personalities. In just a few lines of dialogue, we learn the characters' core traits and we get a glimpse of the kind of chaos that Lincoln endures. Unfortunately, these characters are very blunt stereotypes. Someone might say, it's the first episode, but that's not an excuse. These characters only have one trait, and that doesn't really change. We don't learn anything about the characters throughout the episode, nor the rest of the season. The show when it first started was about life with a large family, and the first 2 seasons or so mostly covered that. This episode really showcases some of the potential the show had, to be a charming, enjoyable show, to tell fun, unique stories about living in a large family, and its ups and downs, instead of the pile of rehashes and repetition it evolved to. It's what gave the show its identity. It was chaotic, reckless, loud, but this could have been handled better. It's quickly becoming obvious that the only real idea with this identity was, and then they fight. This episode has some good examples of that, such as the beginning, when the Louds fight over the TV. As bland as the characters are nowadays, I much prefer the relationships that the siblings have with each other in the current seasons, because they show each other more love and compassion to each other than they ever did in the past. These characters overall were something we accepted in the past because there was no better alternative. On that note, many things about this episode are very dated. The characters' personalities and their relationships with each other are dated. Certain gags like Clyde and Lori are dated and painful to watch. The art style is dated. The siblings have more self-control now. Speaking of the art style is reminiscent of old comic strips. You could see it in character designs as well, and the animation definitely took inspiration from those comic strips. Facial expressions and movements are more exaggerated and zany, like here. All of this helps make the show look more raw and rough around the edges compared to the polish of the later seasons. But at the same time, the animation here is dated. In later seasons, the animation slowed down, became more humane and realistic. And I think that's a good thing. As well, the background work is just bad, especially in the basement where they just turned the color to 0 and made it black. It's just lazy. The comedy in this episode is so great because it's so quickly paced. Jokes happen before you can expect them. Even the slowest jokes move at a steady pace. Nothing is too slow to the point of expectability, which helps to give all these jokes their punch. Sure, they're hit or miss and not all of them land, but the ones that do land will amuse you. In summary, Left in the Dark is an alright episode. It still manages to be a good episode, still keeping many of the things that turned us as fans onto the show in the first place. From the get-go, it introduces us to entertaining characters and immediately sells you the show's premise, showing how something as simple as getting to the TV can become a challenge for Lincoln. Most of the flaws it has developed come from the simple fact that the show has moved on from the days of Season 1 and Season 2, and has since gained a better, but also flawed understanding of the characters it wants to write. So is it a fitting start for the show? I would say that no, it's no longer a fitting start. It's outdated, introducing the viewer into a world of characters who essentially no longer exist. But the episode on its own is alright. For better or for worse, this episode was definitely the start of something, and I'm glad it led into the show we have now. Project Loud House is a better pilot though.